morning. It is very early. It's just gone 6 o'clock. Of course, buttermint in my mouth. It's that time of the week again, start of my working week. It's another fragrance drive along video, and I thought let's talk about something a little bit different today. So we're going to talk about fragrance bottles. Yes, fragrance bottles. Now, that sounds really dull, doesn't it? But I was kind of thinking in bed last night before I fell asleep, how important are fragrance bottles? Now, we've spoken about this in previous videos where we said about how, you know, sometimes the design of a bottle, even the name of a fragrance, can influence your spending. But we're going to go into a little bit more depth about bottles now. And the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about, and the reason it sort of got me thinking, is I'm seeing a growing amount of plastic bottles in recent times, particularly with cheapies, but also with Lush. Obviously, if you know Lush body sprays, they do a lot of bottles that are essentially just plastic. They're like they look like a sort of cleaning spray, a bit gimmicky. And my brother says the other day, he said, I do like obviously the Lush body sprays. They're probably his favourite, but the thing he doesn't like about them is the bottles, because they're a bit cheap. They cheapen the product, and I kind of agree with him there. And is it because it's plasticky? Is it because of the design of it? And the first sort of question I want to talk about with bottles today is the for and against plastic bottles versus glass bottles. Now, something I do like with plastic bottles, and trust me, I'm very clumsy, is if you drop a plastic bottle, it doesn't smash into a million pieces or dent your floor, which in our sort of corridor and leads to the lounge, there's a big dent in the floor where one of the glass candle holders once I dropped dented the floor. So that is one good thing with plastic bottles. The other positive with them, of course, is that they don't, to me, they don't often take up as much space. I find glass bottles, particularly when I'm going to the gym, one of the big reasons I don't take a glass bottle is actually the weight of it, and they tend to be quite bulky. And even some real cheap fragrances I've had, the actual bottle, I'm like, wow, that must be expensive, because there's some serious amount of glass here. And yeah, it's just purely on that reason I tend to favour a plastic bottle out of choice, just because of that fact they're a little bit more, you know, you can squeeze them a bit more, they can fit into a corner of a bag a little bit better, and that's great. Now, where I think it's the downside is, first of all, I don't think they're a showpiece. I think if you've got a nice fragrance, if you're a top fragrance brand, you know, one that's charging £60-80, or you've got a reputation like, you know, a Chanel or a Dior, you don't want it to look naff and cheap if you've made a scent that's very iconic. You really don't. So I think, first of all, visually, typical, someone's just pressed the lights. Someone is awake. Visually, I don't think plastic bottles look as good, particularly if you're having them on sort of side of your counter. Now, the other thing I'm always worried about with plastic bottles, some of you that buy maybe plastic sports bottles, you tend to find, even like plastic kettles, they do have a bit of a taste, never very pleasant. Almost like you've got to wash them out 5 or 6 times, or boil the kettle 5 or 6 times before that plasticky flavour disappears. So one thing I've always wondered is plastic bottles over time, how that affects your fragrance. And for me personally, I think glass will help preserve the fragrance better, just from my own experience. I think, yeah, I'm just not sure about plastic in general in that sense. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about with bottles, beyond that, and yeah, I'm going to say this now, I do prefer glass ones, is how important are the caps. Now, I watched a few fragrance reviews lately. I haven't watched them for a long time. Before I'd watched a fragrance review, and the person I was watching was saying this bottle's great, and they were talking about the presentation, the box and all these things. I'm not too worried about that, but he said the presentation on this one was good because it had a magnetic cap. So are magnetic caps on bottles better than non-magnetic caps? Is it good to have fragrances even without lids? Because I know some fragrances that don't even really have lids. You know, you look at Calvin Klein fragrances, like TK1 shop, you take the lid off initially, then you get the atomizer kind of separate, and then it sprays on top. Personally, I like a lid, and the main reason is because I store like Calvin Klein or CK1 Chuck in a bag or a drawer. I don't want the atomizer essentially to be spraying if I'm not, using it, and I do worry about leakage. But something that's really important for me is when I get a fragrance, I want to be able to pick it up by the lid and not worry it's going to fall off. Because even if you're not necessarily picking it up by the lid on purpose, that wasn't my tooth, by the way, cracking. You don't want it to fall off, and then again, as we said earlier, you don't want it to crack the floor. I'm not a big fan of magnetic lids. This might be an unpopular opinion. I like the idea of them. I like the fact it seems a bit more sleek. But for me personally, there's actually a lot of cars and people around this morning. For me personally, the most important thing is I want a lid that fits. It really clicks. It doesn't, it just doesn't come off where you think, oh, I've broken this fragrance now because it's dropped on the floor because I held it by the lid. So a sturdy lid matters to me. But I don't think magnetic's great because I'm always worried the strength of those magnetic lids isn't as strong as if you just had a lid that clicks on. That being said, aesthetically, it does seem better. And I know for myself, even when you do have those lids that are really tight on the bottle, when you pull them off, it doesn't look great. It looks a bit like, it feels like it's a bit cheap if it's really stuck on the fragrance. So the next thing I was going to say about bottles is design. Now, you would have recently seen I did a review of Dior Savage. Well, sorry, I always say this, not Dior Savage, just called Savage, because of course Dior do Sauvage. And my brother got it the other day. I saw it on the stairs, but I didn't see the writing. I could smell the fragrance first when he put it on, and I thought, wow, my brother's got Dior Sauvage. And of course, from the side of the bottle I'm looking at, without the text, I was like, I can't believe he's bought that. And then you soon realise, actually, no, he hasn't. He's got another clone. And actually, when you look at a lot of fragrance brands, they do more copy the smell than anything else, not necessarily the bottles. But there are plenty out there that do copy the bottles, and I'm noticing it a lot more. Which I do think is a bit of a concern, personally, for myself. I don't think they should be allowed to copy the bottles as much as they do. But at the end of the day, you can't trademark a scent. You're not allowed to. So brands can copy a smell. There's no trademark. You don't own that smell. If you put a combination of those together that smell like something, that's fine. You can't copy a name though. One of the things they say, you can't copy a name. So obviously Savage, 1 billion rather than 1 million. There's loads. Even the Essence Vault, which is a well-known clone brand that I use, they have to just call it the Essence Vault 115, inspired by so and so. So it's not actually the name, but they don't copy the bottles. And for me, I think that's what you should be able to do. You should be able to sort of, say it's inspired by, but don't copy someone's home. But the bottle for me can confuse someone. If someone's not particularly into or knows phrases, I may, not necessarily know that Savage is actually not Sauvage. I may thought I bought Dior Sauvage. Very easy to do. Very easy to do. I know on my phone, if I type in Sauvage, it'll probably auto-correct me to Savage. And I'll think, oh wow, I'm getting, that price for this amazing design instead, not realising it is that, that's not actually the right fragrance. And no, I think you should have to have a different bottle, whether that's changes to colour, whether that's changes to font, or whether that's changes to design. Wow, it's so busy this morning. It's 6:05, or no, 6:10 now. What's everyone doing up at this time? Probably working as well. Obviously, I act like I'm always up at this time. I am running, but not always going to work. So the other thing then with bottles is, what do I think would be a good shape for a bottle design? Now, I've had a few issues with this over the years. So Calvin Klein Obsession is a fragrance I'm a big fan of. I think the scent DNA is great. It's obviously an old school retro fragrance. That bottle has one big positive, and that's that it's quite flat. It's flat like a pancake, essentially. However, it's shaped like a full moon. It's so circular, which means it's very, very bulky. And I've been speaking about this recently, obviously in some of my videos. I'm going on holiday soon. I could lie that one flat, but it just sticks out so much. So I'm not the biggest fan of that bottle, just purely on a lot of rectangular bottles. I think that's probably the most popular shape. Do I think that's the best sort of shape for a fragrance bottle? Yes, but I do think there is a bit of a downside to sort of rectangular bottles, and that's probably the main thing, is in terms of holding it in your hand. You know, something I struggle with, I get really, really cold hands, really sore hands at times. And one of the things I find is if you know, they're bent in a certain way, if I grip things in a certain way, I struggle to grip them. And I can even find that if it's a big 200ml bottle of a fragrance, I've got obviously big Turd Hermes, the actual square rectangular shapes don't work for me. They're really hard to get hold of because they're so big, so I can't really get a proper grip on them. 100ml's fine, but yeah, I do find those bigger bottle sizes, 200ml, things like that, doesn't really work. So for me, I think the best bottle shape, and you don't really get this in glass bottles, and I'm starting to wonder why. And I think the only one I can think of, I think it's a glass bottle, I've never actually owned the fragrance, but it's that shape, it's Perry Ellis Red 360, I think it's called. Just a really long round bottle, almost like a water bottle, because if you think about it, you don't drink normally out of a square water bottle, do you? So something, again, you're holding. The reason it is that shape is probably because it's the easiest thing to hold. Why are fragrances mainly square bottles? Is it an aesthetic thing? Is it... The thing I'm thinking it might be, more than the customer experience, is that, say it's called, I don't know, something eau de toilette. If you've got this cylindrical bottle, it's going to sort of wrap round the edges, isn't it? You're not going to be able to actually read what the fragrance is called, so you'll end up turning the bottle round, it'll be all awkward. And also, I suppose it's more of a height thing as well, is that where I want it to be, you know, easy to fit in my hand and you know, not too wide, if you're then doing a sort of, I don't know, 200ml bottle, that's going to be too big around your hand as well, or it's going to be really long, and again, for storage, for packaging, doesn't really work, does it? So again, there must be reasons behind it. I just think personally I would prefer it if it was more cylindrical. I know Molten Brown are a brand that definitely do cylindrical bottles and cylindrical lids. I just think they look very classy as well, I really do. And then I'm going to quickly finish before I get to work. A Mount Rushmore for my top 4 sort of fragrance bottles that I really like their design. I haven't thought about this at all, by the way, so this is going to be very much on the spot. I'm probably going to kick myself at some point, but there are some absolute howlers of bottles out there. I'm thinking of ones which I really like. Well, I have to say, I actually do really like just the Bleu de Chanel, first one that came up to me in my mind. Just that really sleek, modern, sophisticated type bottle, you know, it's classy. Yes, it's a blue fragrance, but you could tell it's an expensive blue fragrance. Even if I didn't see the name of the brand, I can see it looks like a high quality fragrance. I really, really like that one. I actually really like Guerlain Shalimar, which my mum's own. It's got like a little ribbon on the lid, which I just like. I don't know, it's a little bit gimmicky, but the shape of the bottle tells you that it's kind of this Middle Eastern type fragrance, or it's an Oriental fragrance. I just think it's really classy. Again, it's a bottle shape that's a bit weird, a bit unique. I like that about it. You know, I've just been saying about how I like a certain shape of bottle, but that one I do like just for its sort of uniqueness. And I just think the bottle really represents what the fragrance is trying to be. What other ones do I like? Do I like any gimmicky ones? I quite like the Invictus, you know, trophy bottles in their own weird way. Again, I think what I'm trying to say is, I'm not a massive fan of it myself, but I think for a younger person, which is what it's trying to appeal to, I think it really is a perfect sort of bottle. I absolutely think it's great. And that probably then leads me to the one that maybe is the best in its own way. Maybe some people will disagree with me now. I actually quite like the Male, you know, the sort of ripped torso, let's say. Again, very, very recognisable, classic sort of scent. And, you know, I just like how now, because it's such a recognisable bottle, when they bring out a new fragrance, you can instantly tell what it is. You know it's a Jean Paul Gaultier. You know it's another Le Male, you know, flanker. And for those of you that love those iconic scents, which that one certainly is, you just instantly go, oh, I'll try that other one. Because I think ultimately you're drawn by what you see before obviously what you smell with fragrances. and in this case that works very well. So yeah, I'm sure I've forgotten some very obvious ones, but let me know what you think on sort of fragrance bottles. Let me know some of your absolute favourite ones, and yeah, I look forward to hearing your opinions on the good and bad bottles that are around in perfumery. There are some rubbish ones in my opinion as well, but yeah, thanks for watching today. Catch you later.